Hi everybody, it's Elliot. I hope you're doing well. Before I begin this video and you'd like to use OCD Recovery's coaching services, please reach out to Phil at ocdrecovery.com and he'll get back to you as quick as he can. So today, guys, I wanted to speak about accepting yourself and what this entails. And, you know, accepting yourself is a process and it's fundamental to OCD recovery. And with Albert Ellis's teachings, he says we can choose to accept ourselves. And yeah, that is absolutely true. We can choose to accept ourselves, but it's not like we push a button and we're instantly able to do it. It's very much a process over time, much like a habit. You know, we get into the habit of accepting ourselves, the different facets of ourselves. And then, you know, that is when unconditional self-acceptance will really set in. So yeah, in my view, unconditional self-acceptance, accepting yourself, whatever you want to call it, it comes in three segments, right? So the first is physical appearance. The second is the characteristics, traits and behaviors. So the non-physical things, the things that we can't really see about us. And then the third aspect is acceptance of other people. And all those different elements tie into accepting ourselves. And I'm going to go into some more detail about how that happens. So generally speaking, with acceptance, firstly, you know, acceptance of yourself is having compassion for yourself. You won't be able to accept yourself without having compassion, all right? Because if you didn't have that there, then you're constantly gonna be in resistance and fighting yourself, and you know you're not gonna have that sympathy, and you're not gonna be able to see it from the angle of being a fallible human and not necessarily somebody who's a monster, somebody who deserves to be punished, somebody who's unacceptable. You know, we can always accept ourselves as a human being, no matter what it is. And I know that's hard to hear because of the taboo themes that can be at play, but I'm going to show you now how we can accept ourselves. So yeah, like I said, the first is physical appearance. So people often have a very hard time accepting the different features, the physical features. So it might be your nose, it might be your height, it might be the way that you look in general, you know, your eye color, the color of your skin, how much muscle you have, your body shape. And the physical appearance, because we're almost stuck with that for our whole life, it plays such a big role in acceptance because, you know, of course you can change the way you look to a certain extent, you know, hair color and whatever, but it's generally speaking, once we look the way that we look, we can't necessarily alter it like we think without making, you know, a big financial investment, without significantly, you know, structurally changing ourselves. And yeah, so we are in our body ourselves every day and we see our physical appearance, you know, we look in the mirror and, you know, we have the way that we look. And if we're not happy with the way that we look, we can write ourselves off as no good. You know, if we have one unattractive trait, maybe it's your nose, that it's a bit crooked, you say that you in your entirety are unattractive, right? And it can lead to a whole host of behaviors, you know, so surgery, implants, fillers, you know, body dysmorphia. It can lead to compulsively going to the gym, really strict diets, trying to build as much muscle as you can whilst limiting fat. And we can go past the point where it's actually going to be beneficial to us. You know, you can risk your life of dying in surgery, having a complication, and all those things that we do in order just to chase that acceptance of ourselves. And it's like chasing your tail, because it's always going to move on to the next thing. What's the next lip filler? What's the next bit of surgery? What's the next diet that I can have? And it's constantly moving around, and you're never going to be able to catch it because it's always going to pull away. It's always just going to about be out of reach. It's very much like when you're at the fair, like Nick says, and you hammer the bell, and it just, you know, you can't quite reach the top every single time. You fall short of that. And accepting yourself, the way that you look, will also come with many different compulsions. So yeah, like I said, there'll be lots of mirror checking. Maybe you're doing your hair for 30 minutes every day before you leave the house. Maybe you're going to the gym 7 times a week, which is actually to your detriment. You've got no time to recover. Maybe you're being so strict with your diet that you can barely enjoy your life. And you know, you're hyper aware of the body part that you don't like. So maybe you're hyper aware of your waist and you don't want to wear a particular dress. Maybe you're hyper aware of you know, how much fat you have, so you're really dialed into what food you're eating. Maybe you're dialed into you know, those fears of rejection, and you're trying to get an image or a body shape that caters to the demands of the other person. But when you have conditional self-acceptance like this, right, let me tell you, your life is miserable. Your life is miserable because you're always trying to find an antidote to the acceptance from the external world, when in reality that it comes within, right? And like I said there, if you're scared about having too much fat, you're going to be miserable every time that there's a chance of maybe going out for the restaurant to the family and you're eating a meal that maybe has too much fat. You're going to be constantly hyper aware of what other people might think of you. You're never going to be able to enjoy yourself or the moment because you're always chasing that acceptance and you're so concerned with how that's coming off. Your life will be miserable, okay? And I very much had this, with my experience. I was very obsessed with having a skinny jawline and a skinny face. I'd do compulsive cardio. I'd miserably count calories and make sure that I didn't drink too much in case it just went to my waistline and made my face look puffier. I spent so much time doing that, and it just made me overlook the enjoyment that I could have experienced because I was just so concerned with that. I was obsessed with it, right? So I was obsessed with the jawline, couldn't eat certain things. I'm not saying that you can't be healthy, of course, but balance is always key. And when you can't really have the things that you enjoy in life, then what is life? If you can't have a cake or a donut without worrying about it, then what is life? Essentially. My hair, I'd spend so much time doing my hair, making sure it looked good. And it was just I was just so on edge and chasing that next bit fit and chasing that next thing. I never had that sense of self-satisfaction. I had it with the whole bro thing as well, the alpha thing. I had it with testosterone, because with HOCD I was scared of not having enough testosterone in case I wasn't attracted to women, and I tried to come across as this this alpha bro at times, especially when I was at university. And I couldn't accept myself unless I had the certain level of testosterone, unless I couldn't have a certain level of libido, and I was always chasing that. Again, it made me not sleep well because I was so fixated on it. It made me bypass some happy moments in my life because that was all I was thinking about and trying to achieve. So yeah, it was very, very, very miserable, and conditional self-acceptance will have you feeling that way. It's going to be expensive, especially with trying to change your appearance. I'm not saying that you can't strive to be the best person you can be, sure, but conditional self-acceptance just makes you paranoid. It really does. I can't highlight that enough. And it makes you overlook the good things in your life because you're so concerned about not meeting that ideal that you have placed for yourself, right? So yeah, physical appearance can very much come in that way. And yeah, that is one of the main things that underpins that. All right. So of course, how do you actually accept your physical appearance? Well, it's slowly over time coming to terms with the way that you look, right? It's impossible for you to look differently. Each person is very unique in the sense that they have their own genetic code. Nobody is ever going to exist like you do. You're completely unique in the way that you exist. And it's breaking down, the parts of the body that you can't accept. So maybe if you did have like a crooked nose, well, it's breaking that down. Why shouldn't you have the nose that you do? Why is that so bad for it to look the way that it does? People more than likely will have different opinions about that attribute. Somebody might actually like that attribute, maybe your partner does, and it's only the perception that you hold in it that is getting you down. So you've got to think you're a fallible human. We have very little control over what we look like on a fundamental basis. Your eye color, your face, certain things. Of course, you can change that appearance, sure, but fundamentally, our appearance is very much out of my control. I had no say over me being white and 5'10.5", born in the UK, just like somebody else might have no say about them being 6 foot black, born in Africa. There's just no control over that. And it's about having compassion for yourself as a human being for the way that you look, right? And I know that's hard to hear, but that's very much a process that we can get to over time. All right. But yeah, you're only going to get to that if you're dropping the compulsions, like I said, the safety behaviors, the changes. It's very difficult to have unconditional self-acceptance if you're getting lots of surgery. It's just a fact. Social media usage as well, which can creep into, which I didn't mention. So just being aware of that. How can I accept my physical appearance? Is the thing that I don't like, can I really not come to terms with that? Okay, and you'll find that over time, of course, these belief systems that we've held about our physical appearance are very deep-rooted. They're not just going to change overnight, but over time we can choose to accept that part of us, just like I chose to accept my face, because sometimes I'd be looking in a mirror and I'd just be consumed by looking at my jawline. How skinny is it? Let's try and do some more cardio to try and lose weight around the face. And that was all I could see in the mirror. But over time, I could see that I'm a fallible human who might, store fat in the face, which is a place where fat can be stored. And I brought down the catastrophizing on that and saw that, hey, you know what, I'm valid and okay the way that I am, and I can have that, and it's okay to look this way. I'm valid because I exist just for being human, as Albert Ellis teaches. All right, so that's very, very key when it comes to physical appearance. Another thing, so the second part, so accepting your characteristics, traits, behaviors, and thoughts. And like I said, these are the things that we can't necessarily see. Okay, so it might be certain attributes, so it might be laziness, it might be anger, it might be a certain hobby or interest that you have that isn't the quote unquote norm. It might be maybe a favorite food that you have. Maybe it might be a favorite culture that you have. Right? Every single person is going to have some complex traits and characteristics that can't be repeated across person to person, and every person is going to have what they like, and another person might like something completely different, and that is absolutely fine. Okay, and in order to accept ourselves, and maybe there's a trait or a characteristic that you don't like, so maybe it's laziness, maybe it's anger. In order to push forward and move on with that and improve, acceptance is going to be so important. Acceptance can be the precursor to change, because being in denial over that is going to pull you further away from acceptance. If you fail to see the reality of what it is, then you're going to have a very hard time accepting it. All right. So again, it comes back down to compassion. I can accept myself as a human being for having these different characteristics, traits, and behaviors, because why shouldn't I have them? They're perfectly valid. Like I said, they're valid because they exist, and it's okay for that to be so, right? And looking at the taboo side of things as well. So you might think, you might be in a position now, maybe you've got harm, OCD, POCD, whatever it is, and you think, how can I possibly accept myself for having these really bad thoughts? How can I accept myself for thinking this way? And this is where acceptance doesn't mean agreement comes in. The example that I like to give, I can accept when it rains outside. It doesn't necessarily mean that I like it. I can accept when somebody else has a different political opinion than me. It doesn't necessarily mean that I like it. And it's sort of similar in that regard. And it's also key to think, like, if you had that particular characteristic or thought or behavior or fear, whatever it is causing you suffering, and whatever it is making you not accept yourself, there is something that has led up to that moment. It might be a genetic component. Somebody who causes harm, might be something might be in the brain that's led them to causing that moment. The documentary for In the Mind of Aaron Hernandez is a classic example. He received repeated head trauma from playing football at college, and it had a strong influence on his behaviours when he did harm someone. So there's those elements. The environmental factors, the social factors, and the upbringing. If you're a young kid and you've been raised by a family who cause harm, more than likely those behaviours and mannerisms are going to be carried forward with you into your life, right? And it's just about having a compassion and acceptance and realization that these things can happen. People, when they do things or have certain traits or characteristics, it's not black and white to just say they're bad. No, something has clearly led to them in that moment. And when we apply those use cases for other people, it's very important that we try and reflect that back on us too. When we feel angry, or if we feel lazy, not saying they're productive, sure, but something has led us up to that, and then we can acknowledge that and realize that and try and push forward. So it's about accepting those attributes about us, coming to terms with it, and then pushing forward and trying to be the best that we can, right? Because we're just fallible humans. And yeah, that's so key. And it's also, rating the acts and not the entire self, which is so key when it comes to accepting the non-physical side of us, right? We're too complex to rate entirely. How do you possibly rate a human being in their totality? Somebody who, a 25-year-old person, if you weighted all the acts, deeds, and characteristics of their whole life from the moment they're born to where they are now, it'd be very difficult to say, oh yeah, maybe they're a bit good in that regard, maybe they're a bit bad in that regard, and then to try and come up with an overall final weighting. How do you even get to that? What machine or rating mechanism is going to be in place to apply that rating, and who's going to apply it? Is it going to be some sort of saint or priest who's going to say, right, yeah, at that moment on the 15th of February 2025, this person is 24.6% bad and 75.4% good, or whatever it is. Don't know about my maths there, but you got to think, how do we possibly rate ourselves in the entirety? So that's why it's so much more efficient to rate our acts and characteristics and behaviors, right? And we don't always know what characteristics, acts, and behaviors. Okay, so yeah, again, like with the first element of being, the physical appearance, this is going to take a while. The most taboo themes, fears and acts and thoughts. We're not just going to be able to say, oh, hey, I accept that in the moment. Not only is that compulsive and trying to say that, but we've held these deeply rooted beliefs over a long period of time. It's about breaking that down from the angles that I said. So, genetics, environment, social. Acceptance doesn't mean agreement. And striving to learn from that and push forward, because we're fallible and we can, make mistakes and tweak our thinking and tweak our behaviors based on our learning experiences. All right, so that's another key element too. And yeah, finally as well, acceptance of other people. So it's very rarely you're going to have acceptance of other people and acceptance of yourself as a standalone thing. You don't tend to get one without the other. Acceptance of others will help you to accept yourself. And when you try and accept somebody else, you got to think, right, how could they possibly be different? If I'm sat next to a train, right, and somebody's got really smelly armpits, right, although you want to judge them and maybe berate them or whatever, sometimes it's better, or well, it is better to think, how could they possibly be different than what they are? How could they not have smelly armpits, right? And you look at that and you say, well, there's no reason why they shouldn't, because they clearly do. And again, something has clearly led them up to that moment. Maybe they didn't have the money to afford the deodorant. Maybe they're just a naturally sweaty person. Some people in the genetics have the propensity to sweat a lot more than another person. I've got a friend who doesn't sweat at all, and I actually sweat a lot. If I'm on the tube during rush hour in London, I'm going to sweat quite a lot, right? So you got to think, how can I apply that compassion and that level of acceptance on that person in that situation? Okay. So yeah, like I said, they very much do come hand in hand. And accepting other people, sometimes I found in my journey as well, when I judged others, that pulled me further away from other acceptance, because judgment is a subtle form of control. And as we try and judge people, it almost thinks that it almost tries to put us on the upper hand, and it's almost like a subtle power grab, but it very much pulls us further away from the acceptance of others. So those little behaviors where you might be quick to judge somebody or quick to write them off, think about, how can I stop doing that, and how can I see things from the angle of compassion and acceptance? And then when you do that, you're actually able to apply that to your own teachings. All right, so if you can accept somebody who's maybe caused harm, I saw a story, very bad story, about somebody driving a car into people and like mowing them down in Germany it was. So of course, like, yeah, it's not a great act and you don't agree with that, but it's much more productive to think, how could I see things from that angle of acceptance? And then when you manage to do that, you could also see it from your angle as well, of also being a human being. And when you do that, that is when those extreme beliefs that you hold, and that 0 to 100, he's a bad person, he deserves to rot in hell, all that stuff, you slowly start to deconstruct that in a framework that you might have, and you're able to apply that and reflect that to yourself too. So that's also going to be very, very crucial. And as you accept yourself in all those three regards, right, you'll find that you gradually return to this baseline level of peace. Okay, you're very much internalized in a good way. You're not looking in the external world for other people to tell you who you are. Sometimes when your conditional self-acceptance is very high and you don't really accept yourself, it's almost like you're in the external world looking for other people to tell you who you are. And you're constantly shortchanged because you're trying to meet this certain ideal, and you're really stiff, you're monitoring what you're saying, and you're trying to meet this expectation, and you're very anxious, and that self-satisfaction just isn't there, and you're constantly on guard, almost like you're hyper aware and paranoid. And as that self-acceptance comes in internally, you're not treading the water anymore. You're very calm, and you're able to have that complete self-approval and satisfaction. Again, that's not to say that you're some complete godlike person without their fallibilities. No, you are. There's still some things that you're working on internally, but no matter what it is, whether it's your appearance, whether it's you have some sort of dark side, whether it's your good traits and characteristics, whatever it is, it's about just you're in peace with that while still striving to be the best person that you can be. All right, so bear in mind, acceptance is very much a process. Like I said before, we've held these deeply rooted beliefs about ourselves and society over a long period of time, whether it's our behaviors, whether it's our mannerisms, how that might match up to our culture and upbringing. And when there's that when there's that resistance there, it's you know, it's not going to be easy just to break that down in one moment. So yeah, it's very much a process over time, you know, dropping the compulsions and the safety behaviors that might pull us away further from acceptance. And yeah, looking at the irrational beliefs around acceptance of ourselves too. So, you know, why shouldn't I look a particular way? You know, why shouldn't I act in a particular way? Would that really be awful? And over time, you know, working away at that bit by bit, that will really help to provide the inner framework for self-acceptance. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.